is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network live radio program right here for the next hour and 24 and a half minutes. On this Wednesday, January the 31st, 2024. So I have my colleagues here. Ed Battagliano. Good morning, Ed.
Hey, good morning, Sim.
Wesley Wildman.
Hey, good morning.
Who's more than a colleague, his family. And Christopher Woodward.
I didn't hear you, Chris.
Go again.
Hello? Testing.
He's back.
We're all children of God through faith in Jesus Christ. We're all siblings in the faith.
Yeah, but I don't think
kinfolk.
that's going to get you invited to the family vacation, Chris.
Hey,
That's the point Tim was making.
I'm just trying to find a news way to get on to one of them Holy Land tours.
Well, once we get the Middle East calmed down, we're going back.
Yeah.
You can sign up then. All right, so thanks for joining us today on the program. I will try to limit my uhs today. Everybody looking at me laughing. So anyway, I just
What have you? Someone?
well, I was listening to one of our interviews or something for the program the other day. You know that we did
Yeah.
to hear what happened and what we said because I wanted to make sure I had my points. And I listened to myself. That was a big mistake.
Yeah, that's never a good thing.
Listen to myself. And
Good.
what? Go ahead.
I was going to say, I did that to my one time. I listened to one of our Trivia Friday shows,
Yeah.
and I thought, Ed, you are so loud. we tend towards being self-critical.
Sure.
I know. Well, I got this habit, which y'all pointed out before, bad habit of us. You know.
To no effect. We've
Absolutely.
No, harder.
Oh, you mean trying to get me to stop it?
I
Go
don't
ahead.
remember ever saying it, but you can't. It's very difficult to stop your own bad speaking habits.
Yes.
It
I
takes
forget the exact title of the class, but in college freshman year, I guess it was called public speaking, but we had to go through. I don't know how they spent a whole semester on teaching you to speak in public, but we did, and we had to speak in public toward the in one of
Front
our
of the class.
front of the class, and that was one of the things that they pointed out is the filler words is what they
Yes.
call it, and you don't realize that when you try, they teach you to stop it, obviously, but the more you try to stop your filler words, the more you actually use them, or at least that was the case for me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
because you think about it.
Yes, you think about it, and then it messes up with your train of thought.
And
I'm
that's why it takes a whole semester, though.
There you go.
Everybody has to have their chance
Yeah.
to speak in front of the class
And then clean it
and
up.
then get critiqued.
So what'd you do your public speaking on?
I don't
in your
even
college
remember.
class.
I don't want to
Mine
talk,
was how-
remember, or think about college.
Oh,
Anything that requires grades or
right,
school,
right.
don't want to
Put
think
that
about.
behind you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Chris,
Nightmares.
you're think. I see your mind.
Well, I was just thinking, like, if you try to put too much thought into saying specifically what you need to get done, you sound like you work for NPR.
Right.
So it
So-
You gotta sound more natural.
Yeah.
So I want to sound natural, so I need to just go ahead and use my uhs.
Get them out.
I've said before, I speak good. So
Anyway, I was listening to myself. We are our own self-critics, but I was listening to
Yeah.
myself going, stop saying tired of hearing it. Okay. So anyway, we can do that too, right? So anyway, I do
yeah.
that a lot too. We got a lot of interviews. I did it again. I'm sorry, people. I can't help it. Jenna Ellis will be on with us at the bottom of the hour. Breathe, don't say and she is the host of Jenna Ellis in the Morning on American Family Radio. She's also a constitutional attorney. We will talk to her about, I don't know yet. Haven't decided. We'll see where that goes. And then Steve Paisley Jordahl will be with us in the next hour. Frederick Jackson, one Fred Jackson, is off this week.
Well, he'll be back tomorrow, Lord willing,
He'll be back tomorrow.
on this here program.
Okay. It's just us four, right? No Ray.
That's it.
All right, what's your first story, Chris?
Well, I've got a story here from the Daily Mail. Other news outlets have picked up on this as well. Tehran, there in Iran, is warning Biden, the President Biden, that if the U.S. strikes Iranian soil in retaliation for the deaths of those 3 soldiers this week, Tehran will hit back at American targets across the Middle East, sparking out all-out war between the U.S. and Iran.
Really, Chris? You're going to lead with the end of the world story?
I am.
You need to save that to the end of the show.
I have my.
Okay.
I got my PhD in doom and gloom.
Okay.
Dr.
You know,
Doom.
this is, in all seriousness, this is a volatile situation in the Middle East. It does involve the United States. We've lost 3 soldiers in this drone attack. Many more were injured. So it was a direct attack on our country in that sense, on our military installation. What we will do about it against Iran remains to be seen.
Once our leaders get out of the hospital.
Oh, yeah. Secretary of Defense Austin, well, he is out of the hospital
He is
now.
yeah.
He is out of the hospital, but, you know, Ed, you've studied, you brought this up before, you've studied history, especially how World War I happened, where one thing leads to another. So a small thing may lead to a bigger thing, which leads to a bigger thing, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're in, international combat.
There are some people who make a very strong case, and I don't think this is controversial. I think a lot of historians see the connection between World War I and World War II even, but World War I kicked off with a single individual, Gavrilo Princip, I think, shooting the Archduke Ferdinand, and that sparked because
Of Austria? Or
of the Austria-Hungarian Empire, I believe. This is I'm kind of reaching back here, but that, because of the different arrangements and treaties, dragged the entire European world into a world war. Single individual with revolutionary zeal, and then there was a corporal fighting on the side of Germany, fighting in World War I, by the name of Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler, as we all know, went on, because of the very strict and draconian obligations placed on Germany after World War I, went on to rally his people, I don't mean that in a good way, to hate the rest of Europe for what they had done to Germany, and that his actions led to World War II. So sometimes, as you're pointing out, Tim, we don't always know what one small thing can lead to, especially when you have 2 sides that have treaties or promises of support. We say we're going to support Israel. You have Iran, China, and Russia on the other side saying, well, we support the Palestinians, we support Iran. If we were to retaliate directly against Iran, could that lead to China?
Well, that's what Iran is
Taiwan?
saying today.
Yep.
That's the story that Chris has. The Iranian mullah, or mullahs, that's their religious leaders there, and they control their government.
Right.
They've said if we, the United States, attack Iran, then they will attack us again. They will fire back.
Yeah.
So
To give you guys an idea of how quickly things have changed in the Middle East overall, I've got some audio here. This is National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan last year talking about how things are great in the Middle East. And then you have our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, in more recent days talking about all the death and devastation there, which he hasn't seen in decades. Clip 6.
The war in Yemen is in its 19th month of truce. For now, the Iranian attacks against U.S. forces have stopped. Our presence in Iraq is stable. I emphasize for now because all of that can change. And the Middle East region is quieter today than it has been in 2 decades.
I would argue that we've not seen a situation as dangerous as the one we're facing now across the region since at least 1973.
So that was kind of a then and a now.
Yeah, those were the words of two high-level administration officers, so to speak. Secretary of State Blinken, the last person you heard. But that's how much things have changed in, 4 months? The first fella, what was the guy's name?
Jake Sullivan.
Jake Sullivan. What was his title?
He is National Security Advisor.
And he said, he basically said the Middle East is tranquil.
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 months later, Secretary Blinken says the world's on fire.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paraphrasing now. That's how quickly things have changed.
And I do think, though, that at some point there has to be a discussion, well, there will be as we get closer to the 2024 election. That's that the difference in leadership between the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the previous Trump administration and the current Biden administration, as it relates to having, obviously you want to be strategic. And I'm not saying go out, I'm not implying to go out there and just be, the bully on the block, but you do have to be, have strong leadership, strategic and firm, but strong leadership. Because if you remember, during the Trump administration, the previous one, the news outlets were more concerned, especially the left-leaning ones, that Trump, his team, and his time in office were going to be the ones that lead to a war or other wars or conflicts. Yet it was much more peaceful then during those 4 years than it has been the last 4 or 5 months. And you're seeing that so much so that even we talked about this either yesterday or the day before, and we can't play the clip of it because it's got profanity in it. But if you remember, right before we ended yesterday, Chris mentioned that Joy Reid herself, MSNBC news anchor, was on a hot mic in between this saying that Biden's going to blank start another war during his administration. So I do think that we need to be able to get back at some point. Hopefully, ideally it would be during this administration, but if not, at some point, we've got to have a strong commander-in-chief who recognizes that we've been attacked 160 times in the last 4 or 5 months. That is, American soldiers and our bases overseas have been attacked over 160 times, and we have to do something about this. And we can't keep saying, like we did yesterday, well, we're gonna respond in some way. We'll let you know. We got to respond. No, you have to do something about a drone attack. You have to do something.
Yeah. And
you can't be worried about being accused of starting the next war when you're the one that's being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the problem I'm having with it.
Right.
I just shared my personal opinion.
Yeah. No, it's okay. That's why you're here. It's just a very tenuous. I'm not saying I'm being cliche here, I know, but for the reasons Ed just mentioned, one little thing can lead to another, lead to another. So, if you're somebody like a commander-in-chief, be it Trump or Biden, you have to say, and your advisors, you have to say, well, do we want to potentially do something that aggravates the situation and makes it worse, or do we want to have more of a proportional response?
Yeah.
You got a situation with Israel, they're hopefully trying to wind down the war in Gaza with Hamas. Hopefully that'll wind down soon. Israel's talking about putting a perimeter around Gaza, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You've got these Yemen rebels. What are they called?
Houthis.
Yeah, they're the ones firing weapons and missiles and drones out against our battleships and our
international shipping,
merchant ships.
Yep.
Yeah. Then you've got China sitting there waiting to pounce on Taiwan. A lot of people think
that's been forgot about in the news lately, but it's still happening.
You got Russia and Ukraine continuing their war.
That's right.
So it's just a very, as I say, volatile situation. Well, all right, next story.
Well, from Tehran to Washington, D.C., where yesterday...
Are you sticking with Tehran? Are you just accentuating? I'm not criticizing you as a person,
I believe that's how it's pronounced. Tehran.
I think he was
No,
talking
you-
about the little bit of accent you put.
Yeah, I'm talking about the T-A-Y-Y-Y-Y-Y.
Tehran.
Ron.
Hey, I am
R-O-N.
from Monroe County.
Tehran.
Ron. Tehran.
Anyway,
The
back
Hou-
to you, Chris.
Yeah, the House Homeland Security Committee voted yesterday 18-15 to advance articles of impeachment against one Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas of the Department of Homeland Security. It looks like the floor vote in the House could be as early as next week on whether to vote to impeach Secretary Mayorkas for not doing anything about the southern border. And we all know the situation there. It's broken. It has been broken. Biden's not doing anything. The guy he has in charge of it,
Biden broke it.
Yeah, he did.
Yes.
So it's broken because Biden
And
broke
then he
it.
basically handed the broken thing to Mayorkas. and
Mayorkas.
said, I'm going back.
Bless his heart, he's probably a good neighbor. He probably weed eats and trims his
He probably takes
His
care of his
azaleas
border.
and-
probably trims his
Yeah.
bushes
Yeah.
and
Trims
so
his
forth.
border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heard that, Chris?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you did there, Wesley.
That border
But-
of his
but-
property looks well taken care of.
Probably would invite you over to grill burgers, but he's an absolutely complete joke in his job.
Yes.
And I say that because he won't even admit. He looks at him every time he testifies. He's got a straight face, and he's a bald-faced liar. I hate to say
He
that.
says the border's secure.
I'm sorry. I
Come on,
don't.
Tim.
I don't. Huh?
Still sticking with that, too.
He
That
says
was-
the border's secure.
No, he goes out there every day, and the sky's blue and the sun's shining, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, the clouds are covering everything, and it's raining." And you're going, "No, it's not. It's 75 and sunshine."
Yeah.
Look, we're all out here seeing this. That's the approach he takes to explaining the border. He says it's secure. We got it under control. Well, if that's true, why is it the number one political issue in America right now, and may in fact cost your boss his job?
Yeah.
Right.
Huh? And you can't even admit that you guys don't even know what you're doing.
I just know that you
Oh, they do know what they're doing. That's the problem. Go ahead.
I just know that you lost half your audience because you went politically correct and you didn't go politically correct and you called him a bald-faced liar when he's bald. So you lost me. I'm no
Oh.
longer listening to you anymore.
Listen,
because you're making fun of him with no
my
hair.
hair looks like his, a lot like his.
Okay, so you can get away with that.
I can
then.
get away with it. I sympathize with the man in that respect.
I look old enough to be Brent's grandpa.
So I say,
No, but
is it a
you're right.
bold face or a bald face lie?
Bold.
I
I've
always
heard it both ways.
Bald-faced.
Bald?
Yeah.
Anyway,
In other words, uncovered.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He goes. He needs to be impeached. He needs to be sent to the House.
Yes, and somebody that says as much is Representative Jim Jordan, who's a high-ranking member of a House Homeland Security Committee hearing that voted to impeach Mayorkas. I've got some sound from Representative Jordan from Ohio here, clip 1.
Mayorkas is the one who's carried out this policy. Mayorkas is the one who hasn't been square with the American people when he's testified in front of the United States Congress. And that's part of what Chairman Green and his committee have as their articles of impeachment.
Now, one
Can he
other
be
person.
impeached, though? I mean, will this happen? Because the Republicans even if all the Republicans voted to impeach him, and last time I think there were about 8 or 10 who voted no, they've only got a 1-vote margin, I think Tony Perkins said.
Yeah, it's very narrow.
There have been a couple of retirements and people.
So you'd have to have
stepping down.
every single Republican vote to impeach, if all it requires is a majority.
Yeah, I think the House will probably do it, but then I'm assuming the Senate has to do this the same as a presidential impeachment. So I don't
They
know
would
that
have
the
to.
Senate would.
They
do
would
that.
have to vote to remove.
Although it is an
Mayorkas.
election year, and supposedly Democratic seats are up for grabs.
We need to find out what it means. Let's say the House of Representatives does impeach Mayorkas. He's the Secretary of Homeland Security. If they impeach him, what does that mean? Does that mean is that just a vote of no confidence, or is that a?
No, I think the Senate would have to then take up and vote whether to.
And he would have to be removed from
He'd
his.
be removed. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
One other clip I have on this topic here is Representative Anthony D'Esposito, who is someone we've not heard from much on this program, but Congressman Anthony D'Esposito of New York also talked about Mayorkas, and he says Americans are just sick of border problems. Clip 2.
There are Democrats, there are independents, and obviously there are Republicans who do not feel safe and do not think that Mayorkas is living up to the oath that he took. And we see it in places places like my district. Joe Biden won my district in 2020 by 16 points, and it is overwhelmingly polling that Mayorkas needs to go.
That's one thing I think Republicans should maybe consider talking about this year on the campaign trail, is that Democrats are going to suffer under a broken border just as much as anybody else, because we're all, as taxpayers, going to be on the hook for these people that we're going to have to take care of.
Well, listen, there are a lot of people in the black community who don't like this unmitigated disaster on the southern border, because they not only lose a lot of job opportunities, but they also are seeing a lot of the benefits dry up, because the money is all going to take care of illegal immigrants. So this is not a popular subject or topic. I'm not sure that
You're talking about the big cities like Chicago.
Yeah.
I saw Denver yesterday's overrun. They have 40,000 illegal immigrants they're trying to house and take care of.
And Denver already has a homeless problem.
Yeah.
That's
So
just
now
more.
I'm not saying that is enough to turn the black vote against, say, Joe Biden or whoever's the Democratic nominee, but it may be enough right now to put pressure on Democrats in the Senate who may vote to remove Mayorkas. And just one last little thing about Alejandro Mayorkas. He's not in his current position. He's not inexperienced on this topic. Like he wasn't picked from a group of people who, work on the economy or foreign policy. I was looking up his career, and he started under Barack Obama. He was an attorney for 13 years in California, so obviously
there's your problem.
He's going to be liberal, but he was selected by President Barack Obama to be director of the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, became then the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security, and now the Secretary of Homeland Security. So for the last, whatever that is, 25 years, he's been working on this issue. And so I'm saying this guy knows exactly what he's doing. He's not incompetent. He agrees with the Biden policy on immigration.
Joe Biden, when he took office, said Alexandria, is that his name?
Alejandro.
Alejandro?
I'm showing off now.
He said, Alejandro, open it up wide, baby. Let as many people in as want to come.
That's why
that's our policy.
That's why he's not just, he is lying. I agree with you. When he says the border's secure, he knows it's not secure in the way a real border works, but it is functioning the way the Biden administration wants it to function.
Yeah.
Now, it's been 150 years, I'm reading here, since a cabinet member's been impeached. So you could look at that two ways, just objectively and
it was the Grant administration the last time this happened.
Which one?
The Ulysses S. Grant administration.
Well, then you could look at this and say, well, I don't know if it can happen. On the other hand, you could say it's about time.
100? Are you serious? You mean
the last time a cabinet member got impeached?
Yeah, since a cabinet member's been impeached.
Yeah, Michael McCall mentioned that in the first hearing they had a few weeks ago that featured attorneys general.
Wow.
So it's been a while.
It's past time. Some Americans
that's how you look at it. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
So we're due one.
We're due one.
It's been 150 years.
There's no really good commentary behind that.
I don't know the story either behind that impeachment. I mean, that was during Reconstruction or immediately following.
If you could get Biden to answer with truth serum, and this guy, Mayorkas.
Hot Mike.
I mean, why are they doing this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why? I mentioned it before. I think I know the answer to my own question. If you want to take a sinister view, and I do.
Yeah.
Why Biden and why they're letting millions and millions and millions of people into our country. Don't know who they are, where they're going. Tell them to come back for a hearing on asylum. They know that's not going to happen. They're here now for good. There's not going to be any mass deportation.
Right.
President Trump's promised that. Governor DeSantis promised that. With all due respect to those fellows, that's not going to happen.
Right.
These people are here, and they're not going anywhere now. But the best we can do, this is my view, is we got to stop the bleeding. We got to stop now. We'll be back momentarily. Jenna Ellis coming up.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Some years ago, there was a young man who wanted to find a place to serve his fellow man. Searching, praying, looking, he came to the conclusion that God had called him to be a minister. He began his preparation. He worked hard toward being a minister, but things just didn't seem to fit in place. Following a trying period, he finally left the ministry and turned to medicine. Being a Canadian, he studied at the University of Toronto. During World War I, he served his country as a soldier. Returning to Canada, he practiced medicine in London, Ontario. However, business was not very good for him. Patients simply did not come. But he was not to become discouraged. A man of usefulness, he began reading all the latest medical journals in his spare time. He became obsessed with the tragedies he saw in the disease called diabetes. It was taking the lives of many people. In 1921, he gave up his practice of medicine and borrowed a laboratory in which to conduct experiments. This man had little help or encouragement from his friends. Nevertheless, he worked steadily in the laboratory. He was searching for a cure for the dreaded disease of diabetes. He had a helper by the name of Charles Best. They both applied their knowledge and skill toward the discovery for a cure of diabetes. You know, sometimes it's hard to find one's place in life. Often it seems for many of us that we just don't fit in anywhere. We try one thing and it doesn't work out. Then we go to another field with not much success. But there's a feeling in all of us, and I think it's divinely implanted, that somewhere there's a job for us to do. And the truth is, there is. We all have a role to play in the theater of life. None of us are of such little importance that we should be left out when the curtain is pulled and the play begins. We each have a special talent given by our Creator, which He expects us to pass on to others. We probably aren't able to do some things as well as other people do them, but then they aren't capable of doing some things as well as we do them either. We should each do the best we can with what we have to do with. I guess you call that stewardship. If we'll make that serious search, we'll find our place in life. How was it that the Good Shepherd said it? Seek, and you shall find. I believe he meant that. Keep looking, keep searching, keep hunting for your spot to fill, and one day you will find it. And life will have meaning and purpose because you do. The man who left the ministry for medicine was Sir Frederick Grant Banting. He found his place and discovered insulin. Millions of diabetics are glad he did. And if you haven't found your place, keep searching. You will.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Have no fear of them, nor be troubled, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame. 1 Peter 3:14-16.
American Family Radio. This is Today's Issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of Today's Issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of Today's Issues.
Welcome back to Today's Issues. That's Today's Issues, the name of this show here on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Tim with Ed, Wesley, and Chris. So if you keep his score at home, Ed has 12 O's for the show so far. And Wesley has 7. us, but Wesley hadn't had much speaking time.
That's right. So when you get through, I got to ask the parameters of the game here.
Okay, all right. The rules?
The rules.
Well, I'm keeping score. Chris, you got 11.
Okay.
So you're one behind Ed on us.
I'll get on that.
Okay, and I don't know how many I got.
In most games.
Oh, how convenient.
In
I
most
haven't counted my own us. Go ahead, Wesley.
In most games other than golf, you're trying to get the highest number.
score.
So
Right.
in golf, you want to get the lowest
Golf
number.
and see, I did it again.
Golf
Use
and
it,
us.
Yeah.
Golf and us, we're trying to get as low. I just want our audience to know, because our audience is the fans is what keep you accountable. Okay. And we got our
Yeah,
audience.
we don't want
listen-
that.
Do we
really.
have fans?
Well, we have an audience. I assume they're fans of us, so they
I've
wouldn't be
told
listening.
our fans, such that they are, to keep any emails positive and encouraging.
Right.
K-Love emails.
Positive
We
encouragement.
don't, huh?
Yeah.
Huh?
Life's
Does-
hard.
does
Life's
huh-
hard
does
enough without opening up
Did-
negative emails.
Your huz,
Yeah.
do those count as us?
My hus?
Yeah,
Did I
because you
say
go,
huh?
huh? You said, huh?
Huh? Yeah, that's the same thing.
Yeah.
Maybe spelled a little bit different.
Filler word. Any
All right.
filler word.
You're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening to AFR. Ed, before we go to our guest, Jenna Ellis, tell us how people can watch this year's show, engage this year's program.
Yeah,
Things of
and,
that
and by the way, with Jenna coming up, talk about somebody who uses a lot of fillers when she talks.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Lady just can't get put a sentence together. Can't string a sentence together. I'm just kidding, since she's not on yet.
There she is now. Jana, you want to defend yourself?
Absolutely.
Okay,
and I just
need
want
you
to say,
Go ahead.
I just want to say for the record, you have listeners, Tim. Taylor Swift has fans. Let's just be clear. Okay.
Apparently.
Duly noted. You know.
And to Ed,
Hey,
I
listen.
will off you anytime, and we can have an off.
All right, I'm gonna do as
And you
Tim
need to take
instructed
that.
here, and then I would like to get Jenna's
There you
view
go. That was
on the
2
Taylor
2
Swift
seconds.
thing.
Go, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can do that. We got a lot to talk
okay.
about. Go ahead.
So, folks, here's the thing: if what Tim is talking about, if you'd like to watch the live video stream
of this
show, you can do that. There are 3 ways for that to happen and to make your life filled with joy by looking at our faces. Okay, you can go to Facebook. You can go to YouTube and search for Today's Issues on YouTube. It is Today's Issues Live. Or you can go to our own streaming platform, streaming.afa.net, streaming.afa.net.
So Facebook, YouTube, or our own streaming service.
That's right.
Okay, and our streaming service, our YouTube channel is Today's Issues. What is
Live.
it, Brent?
They can search for Today's Issues Live on
Right.
YouTube, and they'll find us.
Gotcha. And on our Facebook page, Today's Issues Facebook page, we post the stories. We put the stories that we talk about so you can see where we get our information from. Jenna hosts the Jenna Ellis in the Morning program, heard 7 to 8 o'clock Central Time on American Family Radio. Just a few things we want to talk to you about, Jenna. First of all, where do you think the border crisis has reached critical mass in our country? Where do you think this is going?
This is going to a showdown between the federal government and the states, and we need to have an emphasis on federalism and re-understand, if that's a word, get educated again on state sovereignty and the whole constitutional question of the union, but also that the states actually have power given by the U.S. Constitution that does not require federal government approval, intervention, or participation. And this is what Governor Abbott has been doing, but I think he has been too reticent. He has done a good job, I think, of standing up to Biden and the ridiculous Supreme Court decision in the last couple of weeks. But where was this 3 years ago?
Right.
So I covered yesterday on my show with Governor DeSantis's press secretary, Jeremy Redfern. We had a whole segment, and it was great, on Governor DeSantis, who is a very great constitutionalist. He understands the Constitution, the power of the states, and he is calling for constitutional amendments, not only for the border issue, but to basically defund a lot of the federal government agencies that are out of control and to rein in the federal government. And it's an excellent proposal, and this revives the whole national conversation about an Article 5 convention of states. But this is really the direction that I've believed for a decade. And especially now that America really needs to head if we want to ensure that we have our Constitution in its actual form, not just all of these reinventions and interpretations by Democrat executives, deep state bureaucrats, and an out-of-control, unhinged Supreme Court.
You know, Abraham Hamilton III, also a constitutional lawyer, as is Jenna, and I've asked both of you in agreement here. The state of Texas and the governors who support the 28, I think, governors who have issued, it's either governors or state attorney generals.
Mm-hmm.
I know in the case of Kentucky, they have a Democrat governor, but they have a Republican attorney general, and he spoke out because the governor won't criticize Biden because he's a Democrat. But Texas is not going rogue here, okay? They have firm constitutional grounds on which to stand, U.S. Constitution grounds on which to stand to take the actions that they're taking to protect their citizenry. And it's unfortunate that Biden has chosen to not enforce our border laws and let everybody in and use the excuse that, well, they're all claiming asylum, so we got to send them all over the country and we can't stop them. Yesterday, or the day before, Biden said, I've done everything I can do on the border.
That was yesterday.
Yesterday.
What a
ridiculous,
pathetic answer.
We do have that audio.
And false.
Oh, we do have that?
Totally false.
Let's play that audio.
Yeah.
And then Jenna can come back.
This is him standing outside fielding questions from reporters. So you're going to hear a little bit of background and aircraft noise. Clip 3.
Tell all I can do. Give me the power. I've asked for the very day I got it off. Give me the border patrol. Give me the people. Give me the people, the judges. Give me the people to stop this, to take it work right.
Was that it?
Yes.
Was that Biden?
President I know his voice sounded like
voice
he's sucking.
His voice is sound like
sucking helium or something there.
Yeah, that was different.
Has he got a helium addiction we don't know about?
I'll ask Jill.
Well, it's not like addiction runs in the family.
All right, Jenna, what's anyway.
Well, I think, Tim, that you underscore a really, really important point. Greg Abbott is not acting out of rebellion. He's not just simply saying, I don't care about the Supreme Court decision. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to ignore the federal government. I'm going to ignore legitimate authority. He is actually pointing out that it is the federal government and the Supreme Court that are in conflict with the highest law of the land, the U.S. Constitution. We are a nation of rules, not a nation of rulers. And this is so important. This goes back to all of the COVID crisis mandates and things like church closures, where pastors who stood up and said, no, Governor Newsom, no, Gretchen Whitmer, no, Andrew Cuomo, you can't tell me that I have to close down my church because the First Amendment protects my right. And so they appealed to a higher authority than the government agent that was telling them to act contrary to our rule of law. And so this is why it is so incredibly important that conservatives and especially Christians understand our rule book, because we can't play the game effectively and we can't interact in civil society if we don't know what the Constitution says, how it operates, and what powers it actually gives, not only to the states, but also to we the people. Yeah, we the people also have powers of governance in terms of governing ourselves. That's what self-government means.
Wesley?
This is Wesley here. What does the Constitution, or what powers does the Constitution give the President of the United States as it relates to the controlling and or protecting is a better word, protecting our borders?
So he has the ability to nationalize the federal or the National Guard, federalize the National Guard. He has the ability and the obligation to enforce borders. He's the commander-in-chief of the military. He could send military down to the border. And the Constitution specifically gives Congress the ability to determine the uniform rule of immigration and naturalization. And so when we're talking about declaring an invasion, when people who are not coming into this country legally, contrary to the rules that Congress has established, he also, as the president, can enforce the law. That is through the executive branch, and he has an obligation to enforce the law. But when he doesn't, and when he is derelicting all of his duties that are established in Article 2, because that governs the presidency, then the states, through Article 1, Section 10, have the ability to protect themselves from actual invasion, regardless of what the federal government is doing.
You know, this is not a. Have people always crossed our southern border? Some people throughout history, yes. I remember reading about the Mexican migrants who would come up. This is probably early 20th century, maybe to mid 20th century. The Mexican migrants that would come up during the cotton picking season in the South, and they would come in and they would, be here to work, and then they would go back home to Mexico. That was a friendly. I don't even know if they had a worker permit. It was probably back then. It was probably everybody understood what was going on. Mm-hmm. But now, when you have a federal government that is ready to give financial handouts, money, and shelter, and food, and health care, like California just did, you don't think that that incentivizes people? That's why it's a cottage industry now. People are actually coming from around the world, coming to Mexico, some case flying in, and then walking over our border. And our border security agents, what do you call them, border control?
Yeah, Border Patrol.
Basically now they're the welcome wagon. They're handing out gift bags and subway discount coupons.
Babysitting.
And and facilitating. And some of them have talked about this. They're just greeters now, like ushers at a church. Yeah. Huh?
And they're ignoring the law. I mean, all of this claim for amnesty and everything. And if we remember when the whole DACA, the Dream Act, which failed in Congress, but when Obama set as his policy to just blanket say we're going to defer the actions against illegal immigrants that came as the children, they came in when they were minors underage. The Supreme Court at that point didn't just reject the idea out of hand. They said you can't enforce a policy broadly that expressly goes against a law that Congress has passed, that the Constitution gives them authority to legislate according to. And if we had a Supreme Court right now, and I don't think by any stretch we have a consistently conservative majority, clearly, they would say, sorry, Joe Biden, you can't set policy and you can't not arbitrarily not enforce the law and the Constitution. And concurrently, the Constitution gives power to the states to defend themselves. And the Supreme Court would acknowledge that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens, but this is a big political albatross around the neck of Biden and Democrats who are defending him on his border. And that's becoming, there is a crack in the Democrat Party over this. John Fetterman, the Democrat senator from Pennsylvania, he came out, I think it was a brown hoodie, and it was Brown Hoodie Day.
Probably a Carhartt.
He was commenting. Anyway, there are political operatives on the Democrat Party who don't care about the issue per se, but they only care about it in as much as it affects their chances of winning in November. And they're saying something has to be done. Mm-hmm. Now, Biden's saying that if Congress, by that he means the Republicans, will send me a bill, I'll sign it, that will deal with this issue, but I've done all I can do. That's what his claim is. I don't think the majority of American people are going to buy that. I don't think the majority of even Democrats, are going to buy that argument. If the President of the United States is helpless to stop an invasion of his country, then I don't know. I don't know what.
That's an admission that we need a new president. as Jenna said, and Jenna, go ahead and reiterate this. What I heard you saying is that the Constitution gives the president, it's the executive branch. They are to execute the laws. And so if Congress has said, no, you can't just come across, you mentioned that to stop people from doing it anyway, the president could federalize the National Guard and just simply say, you're not coming across. But if the president refuses to do that, he can't then say he's powerless.
Yeah.
Exactly. And really well said. I mean, if he derelicts his duty, and this is in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the president shall be commander-in-chief. And also Article 2, Section 1.1 says the executive power, so the ability to execute the law, shall be vested in a president of the United States. So if he just ignores what he's supposed to do, that doesn't then render the states helpless, particularly when they have concurrent power to repel an invasion. And this was debated at the Constitutional Convention because the Articles of Confederation that the Constitution replaced did not have a strong enough powers that were given to the federal government for the whole union and for some things that the federal government needs to provide to all of the states. But the delegates from the states did not want to give up their sovereignty and just say, we want to be ruled by what would become the DC elites. They foresaw that and they understood that. And so we have this concurrent power that if the feds aren't doing anything about it, the states can and must.
You're listening to the radio program Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We're here Monday through Friday. I'm Tim with Ed, Wesley, and Chris, and Jenna Ellis joining us now. Do you have a question?
Yeah, Jenna, just a quick question. We were talking before the break about let's say a Republican gets into office in the White House. What can be done about all the illegals who are in the country right now? We kind of bounced around, and maybe it was during the break, I don't remember, but that none of us expect to see mass deportation. So let's take that off the table for a second. Is it legal for the federal government to say this? In 6 months, the federal government and the money that states get from the federal government will be cut off for all non-citizens. If you are here illegally, you will not get free. You won't get, free housing, free health care, whatever. We're cutting that off in 6 months. We will give you a $500 stipend from the federal government, put you on a plane and fly you home, but you can't stay here. Is that legal to cut off welfare?
This is the power of the purse that's actually given to Congress. And so these types of allocations of funding, regardless of who is in the White House, this is why majorities matter and why the very slim Republican majority needs to address these issues, and why back in 2018, when President Trump was getting a lot of flack for his executive order on immigration, I thought it was brilliant. It was brilliantly worded. And I said this on air at the time, that all he did was say, Congress, you need to deal with this because the Constitution gives this ability to Congress. And if they would simply cut off all of the aid to the states in terms of how they are providing welfare for illegals, Congress could do that today. And that is something that I know that Speaker Johnson has a lot of stuff in terms of the calculus of what's going on. But while we have a Republican majority, and while this is the number one issue based on the exit polls out of Iowa and New Hampshire, and we're heading into a presidential election year, why don't the Republicans demand that Congress do something about the funding of all of this nonsense, and a demand that the executive branch actually enforce the law as it's currently written?
All right, one other element of this that you always hear is that, Jenna, is that the people coming here, they get to the border, they get to the Mexican-U.S. border, they don't even fight. They don't try to dart across the desert to get away. They go up to the border patrol and say, "Hey, I'm here." Right. And they say it in Spanish or Chinese or Ethiopian, depending on where they are from around the world. And then they say asylum, right? Isn't that the claim?
Yeah, and it's even worse than that because there are a lot of very well-funded organizations that are actually attempting to provide these migrants with paperwork to have a claim of amnesty.
Is that the Catholic Charities?
Well, and some of them are Democrat funded because they want these people to get over the border, and that could be Catholics as well. I mean,
well, I have a lot of friends. We have a lot of listeners in sport. I'm not castigating the Catholic Church altogether. I'm just saying a lot of these Catholic charities are down there on the border, and they're facilitating these people coming over.
Because they have this very misplaced perception of we're doing this in the name of humanitarianism.
Right.
Humanitarianism is not an obligation of the federal government. That may be
help law breaking.
Right. And humanitarianism is not one of the powers or philanthropy that's given to the federal government, and certainly not to override the requirement that the United States has to protect its borders.
Yeah.
But so these migrants are coming in with this paperwork, and all they do is give it to the checkpoint, and so they're not even coming in under covers of darkness or wading through ponds or anything. They're going to these checkpoints, and this is why overall the wall helps some, but it's just basically funneling these migrants to these checkpoints. Then they get a court date for a year later. They never show up. Nobody ever finds them, and now they're just out in America free to do whatever they want, which a lot of it includes crime.
What the asylum laws, which were a part of our country's rich history, we wanted to help people who are being ethnically cleansed or religiously persecuted systematically somewhere in the world. So we had laws that allow for somebody to plead political asylum. I mentioned this before, but that's what every single one of these people are doing who are coming here. They're pleading asylum, then they're turned loose to go into the interior of our country, never to be heard from again. Okay? So it seems to me you're going to have to adjust or amend the asylum laws too, Jenna. Seems to me. I've suggested.
Well, and they're absolutely, but they're also using this as a pretext because asylum is supposed to be a carve out for and basically an exception to regular immigration law for a very, very narrow set of people, and it doesn't mean that anyone can just prefer to come to the United States. Like all of these refugees, for example, from Middle Eastern countries that have now been displaced over the conflict, if they can be resettled in other countries that speak their language, that are closer to their actual home, they don't just get to select and prefer America because they've been displaced, even if they otherwise qualify for asylum. So there's a lot of ways that this definition and the legal definition has been expanded and frankly perverted beyond even what the law itself already dictates. And this is why you need better enforcement.
And Christians, for many, many years, we have and we continue to do mission work in other parts of the country, in the country,
other parts of the world,
including in Mexico. And the church has done a good job, for lack of a better word, but doing mission work or humanitarian work. We take goods and food and we share the gospel. We do a good job with that already. But as it relates to the southern border, we need to get away from, as Christians, looking at that as humanitarian work and let the government do what it's supposed to do, which is to protect the citizen, which if you think about security through the lens of securing, you have to consider all possible bad scenarios that could happen through the southern border. Therefore, you're, as a defense mechanism, as they come through, the idea is to prevent anything that could go wrong. So your first reaction as from a government position should not be, how can we help them do what they want to do, but more so, how can we protect the citizens, and how can we, it's a security measure. That is a thought that should be going through the administration and those that are
right. And I'll give you this a quick analogy. It would be like if parents, if you Tim, with your kids and grandkids, and if you said, well, I care so much about the broader community that I'm not going to protect my own kids, and I'm going to prefer, under the auspices of humanitarianism and promoting the gospel, I'm going to actually have a negative impact and allow criminals to come into my home and not protect my own children. That would be actually antithetical to what the Bible requires of you as a parent. And it's the exact same thing for the federal government in terms of the law.
Amen.
There's an obligation on the United States to protect its own citizens, not to protect the rest of the world.
Yeah, while we commend Governor Abbott and have on this stand that he's taken, and I think he's constitutionally right, as Jenna's pointed out, talking to Rick Green, Abbott should have done this 2 years ago.
Yep.
That's where a lot of people are upset with him in Texas, because he hasn't moved fast enough on this. He hasn't. So that's for Texans understand this. people from the outside looking in who are applauding Abbott. Yes, we are applauding Abbott, but a lot of Texans have saying
100%.
he should have done this a year or two ago.
Yep.
He before millions, anyway. All right, thank you, Jenna. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much, guys.
So, people, we will be
convened back.
We'll be coming back in 5 minutes.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association, a ministry with a mission to inform, equip, and activate people like you to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture and to give aid to the church here and abroad in her task of fulfilling the Great Commission. We couldn't do it without your day-to-day support. American Family Association. Find us online at afa.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. President Biden says he has decided on a response to the Iranian proxy attack in Jordan, but it remains unclear what the response will be. Florida Senator Marco Rubio saying what he thinks the response should be.
We're going to have to reestablish deterrence, or we're going to see more strikes against Americans throughout the region and in other parts of the world.
The Senate Judiciary Committee holding a hearing with big tech CEOs to discuss harmful content and the sexual exploitation of children online. Senator Lindsey Graham shares his thoughts on big tech's lack of oversight and regulation.
We live in America in 2024 where there is no regulatory body dealing with the most profitable, biggest companies in the history of the world. They can't be sued, and there's not one law on the book that's meaningful protecting the American consumer.
Massachusetts finding itself grappling with a surge of newly arrived migrants. As a result, the governor is repurposing a state-owned recreation center. Molly Line has more from Boston.
This big community center, it serves the elderly as well as underprivileged youth in a neighborhood here in the city that is predominantly black, and not everyone is happy that it's being turned into a temporary shelter serving, including the migrant population, for the next several months. This comes, of course, as the state continues to grapple with an influx of migrants and also a shelter system that is packed beyond capacity. Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu, a Democrat, is not thrilled with the state's plan, but the Melnia-Cass Recreation Complex is state-owned and has the capacity to house up to an estimated 400 people.
The head of an immigration enforcement think tank believes that when judging the merits of a border dispute case, the Supreme Court could rule in favor of Texas and against Joe Biden. Chad Groening has more.
Many conservatives have voiced their disappointment over the Supreme Court's recent 5-4 decision giving the Biden administration permission to resume cutting through concertina wire along a 29-mile stretch of the Rio Grande in Maverick County, Texas. Texas Governor Greg Abbott had authorized the wire, one of a series of measures the three-term Republican has taken on the border in the name of curbing illegal crossings from Mexico. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined the liberal members of the court in rendering the decision, which sends the case back to a district judge. Mark Krikorian is executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies.
I think it's entirely possible that when they get to judging the merits of the case, they actually will decide in Texas' favor. Because the basic question here is, do states have a right to protect themselves when the federal government simply refuses to do so? And there's a pretty strong case there, and we're going to see.
And Krikorian thinks in the long run this case will hurt Biden politically.
The story is Biden is trying to help illegals come into the United States, and then there will be pictures of illegals coming to the United States being helped by the Biden administration. So Texas isn't using armed force. They're just using regular law enforcement. And the court could very well find that the state has a right to protect itself. So I'm actually kind of bullish on the outcome of this case, despite this initial loss.
I'm Chad Groening.
A California teenager is now in a Florida jail, charged with making a phone call to police posing as a mass shooter. Evan Brown reports from Broward County, Florida.
Deputies in Seminole County, Florida, outside Orlando, now have 17-year-old Alan Winston Fillion in jail. He's been extradited from Lancaster, California, on charges he made a swatting call posing as a mass shooter at a mosque. He even uses sound effects. The 911 call is disturbing.
All right, and...
Those gunshots were not real, but deputies needed to make sure the mosque wasn't being attacked. Fillion is being charged as an adult. In Broward County, Florida, Eben Brown, Fox News.
On Wall Street, the S&P 500 was 0.9% lower. The Nasdaq Composite fell 1.6%, and the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.1%. The Federal Reserve will announce its latest decision on interest rates this afternoon. American Family News is online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
AFR programming is now available on Alexa.
You're joking, right?
Nope, not joking.
Seriously?
Yep, this is not a drill.
Wait a minute. No way.
There's a way, the Alexa way. So if you just happen to miss your favorite shows, no worries. You can now listen to each podcast with Alexa. It's simple and it's free. Just visit afr.net/apps and click Alexa. We're not joking. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, president of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Today's Issues. We got 24 and a half more minutes here on the program today. Thanks for listening. Today's Wednesday, January the 31st, 2024. I'm Tim with Ed and Wesley, and joining us now is Steve Paisley Jordahl. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning. How y'all doing?
You got the abstract art shirt today?
Wesley has deemed this as tie-dye.
Well, that's a tie-dye?
I don't think it's technically a tie-dye.
It's like watercolors to me.
Yeah.
A watercolor shirt. Huh?
Watercolor would be more accurate. We're all about being accurate on the program.
Yeah.
So we got to get this right.
Yes.
And
eliminating our filler words.
Yes.
Wesley, you looked this up, didn't you, Wesley? What are the most common filler words that we as humans use?
Let me look. Here we go. It's
yeah,
like, or all right. Those are the most common. Now, if you go on and read this particular article, they get so far to say that there's filler phrases. So like needless to say or therefore.
Anyway, a lot of people use so anyway.
Anyways. However,
at the end of the day.
Yeah,
After the fourth, at the end of the day, in about a 5-minute conversation with somebody, I do feel the need to intervene.
Or for what it's worth. Basically
things like that.
The only thing is, I think that's awful critical because how else are you supposed to? You get too far along in here. How else are you supposed to communicate on a long day? But I guess
when I was a kid, the old timers used to. My dad would be talking to somebody. My dad wasn't an old timer when I was a kid. He was in his 30s. But I just remember this expression would come up all the time. They would say, and things of that nature.
Things of that nature.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
we'll have to bring that one back.
You could be talking about, okay, what are you going to have for lunch today? Well, I'll have a club sandwich, a Caesar salad, and things of that nature.
Things of that.
I do. We've all got one that does bother us, and I do have one that does bother me.
Okay.
So it's called the bottom line.
So the bottom line?
The bottom line. And the only reason is because I follow a particular gentleman on YouTube who does a really good job at discussing hunting and habitat management and all things related to hunting, which is very educated and smart, and he's a lot of experience, which I enjoy. It's a passion of mine I enjoy. So I'm watching him, and now I'm at the point as smart and as intelligent and as good as he is on the issue that I'm going to learn from him for, I can no longer get any information of him because all I'm sitting there is counting how many times he's going to say, well, the bottom line is, and I was sitting there with Chelsea. At this point, I'm about a year into watching him, and at this point, all I hear is the bottom line, and I told Chelsea, she was sitting there beside me, who's not interested in this at all. I was like, just help me here.
Right.
See how many times he says the bottom line in 15 minutes. I'm giving him a hard time, but It's something that once you, as Ed was mentioning during the break, once you catch someone's filler word, it's hard to unhear it.
So the bottom line is you're not going to watch it.
I was going to say you should just never have told me that.
The bottom line.
Because now
I get it.
I'm going to slip it in every chance I get.
Well, guys, at the end of the day, it really, go ahead.
What bugs me is when somebody misspeaks a phrase. I've heard people
purposefully or accidentally?
Accidentally.
Okay, I got
Like I've heard people say for all intensive purposes.
Yes.
Or
irregardless.
Irregardless.
Irregardless. No such word.
Somebody actually said if he could, if he has the mustard to do that, what's the mustard?
Cut the mustard. And people say it's cut the mustard.
Yeah, something around that. Like
it's cut the mustard.
What is it the phrase say? People say that. They say that expresses it doesn't matter. That they say it wrong. In other words,
irregardless.
Maybe irregardless, but it's something. I'll think about it. Some other expression that people use.
Now, my wife would be better to speak at this. She's a speech pathologist, but there is a psychological or something that happens in our brain when we say
Oh, I know what it is. Excuse me, Steve.
Go ahead.
One of my problems is interrupting. but I am self-aware. You know what I'm saying?
You just can't help it.
and I say that a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But people, doggone it now. It's
you lost it.
Well, I couldn't care less.
Right. Yes.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Right.
People often say I could care less.
Yeah.
Oh, so you could care less. But you could care less than you do right now?
Well, then why don't you try it? Try caring
Show me
less.
how you could care less when they meant to say I couldn't.
Right.
We don't have it. I don't have it in front of me. I need to bring it next week when I'm on. But Tim Hawkins, who's a Christian comedian, he has there I go. He's got a YouTube video with all of the most either misused or phrases that we're talking about, and then he goes on each one of them. He gives a pretty good tangent commentary on it, as you just did, and
He's
they're pretty fun. Yeah, they're hilarious.
Yep.
All right.
There we go. Okay.
That's okay.
We're not judging today. We're going to switch our topic to something more serious here. Alistair Begg, the well-known pastor from Ohio, Truth for Life radio program that we aired for 10 to 12 years. I don't know exactly how long the program was on the air with us. It's got the story about him and what he said about gay marriage, and then also our role here at American Family Radio. That story has broken into the mainstream news. Fox News website has a big story on it right now. This has been totally organic in Christian circles and now in the secular world in terms of the news event about it.
We're certainly not wanting to trumpet about it.
No, we didn't. This wasn't something we're not pounding our chest going, look, we're right and he's wrong. Ed, to review briefly, what happened here with between us and Alistair Begg?
Well, Alistair Begg, who is, like you mentioned, the pastor of Parkside Church in Cleveland, Ohio, has a podcast. So this was not on his show, which his show that used to air on our radio network was simply an edited version of a sermon that he preached. But on a podcast, he was asked, he volunteered. He was being asked questions, but he volunteered the advice that he had given. This is back in September of 2023. It's really now just resurfaced. That when a grandmother asked him about attending her grandson's wedding, her grandson was marrying a transgender person. I'm not sure which way that is.
I think that's right.
Okay. And she was struggling with that. She loves her grandson. She wanted to know, should I go? Pastor Begg said, well, my answer is going to make some people upset. And he asked the grandmother, he's relating this story, does your grandson know that you disapprove of his lifestyle? Yes. Does he know how you feel about homosexual marriage? Yes. He said, then I advise you to go to the wedding and take a gift. If you don't, then you are only going to confirm in the mind of your grandson that you are what he already thinks about Christians, that you're judgmental and uncompassionate or something of that nature. We Walker Wildman and I got on the phone days later and discussed this statement and this advice from Pastor Begg with two of the people who are on his staff working on his radio program. We expressed our absolute disagreement with that position and asked if Pastor Begg would be willing to recant and apologize, and then we could move on. And we were told he will in no way change his mind or apologize. This is what he believes.
Okay, what's wrong with what he's advocating for? Why is it a big deal?
Well, it is, first of all, is a big deal because this is an issue. The acceptance of the LGBTQ lifestyle is becoming a huge issue in the evangelical church. So this is not something that is just a put it on the shelf issue. This is confronting a lot of churches. But the advice for a Christian to attend a wedding that is contrary to what the Bible teaches is a very serious mistake. I likened it to what we would say about almost anything else. I use two examples here. About almost anything else, we would say, no, absolutely should not go.
Can I play the part of Pastor Begg for just a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
Got to do it with the
No,
Scottish
what?
accent.
Yes. Well, no. Let me play. Okay. So let's say Pastor Begg. Again, we have a lot of respect for, and we didn't pick this fight. We didn't want this. This was totally on him. All on him. He's the one who voluntarily took this question on a podcast. He brought it up.
And by the way, doubled down on a sermon.
That's what we need to get. We'll get to that.
He's triple down. So
triple down.
So, Ed, I'm a grandfather, and my granddaughter, she wants to work at the strip club down there. She wants to strip and make a living, and I think I want to take her. She's asked me would I drop her off for work and pick her up, and I just don't know whether I should do that or not. So, Pastor, again, if Pastor Begg were asked that question, I'm a grandfather. I just don't know. I don't feel right about doing this. Pastor Begg, can you help me? What should I do? What would he say?
If Pastor Begg used the same reasoning that he used on the wedding example,
Same-sex homes?
He would say, well, as long as your granddaughter knows, sir, that you disapprove of what she's doing and that it's a sin in the Bible,
right?
Then, yes, you should go and take a gift and go in and encourage her in her
so that
work.
you're not judgmental.
So that otherwise, if you don't, your granddaughter is going to know that my suspicions about Christians were correct, and you're judgmental and prudish, and boy, I'm never getting saved.
No, you know what? That isn't what Pastor Begg would say. He would
Absolutely not.
He would say to the grandfather, absolutely not. You don't take your granddaughter to the work at the strip club.
Right.
That would mean you're giving tacit approval to that behavior and that lifestyle.
That's right.
You can't do that. You're encouraging her in her sin.
Yes, and I see this is different. This is one of the things that Walker and I, then I'll open it up here. I don't want to dominate, but we one of the things we talked about with Pastor Begg's representatives was that there are plenty of ways. In fact, this was what Walker said. He said there are plenty of ways to show love to people. Some of the people defending Pastor Begg are saying, no, you've got to show love to people who aren't Christians in order to lead them to Christ. Well, what Walker said, and it's absolutely true, is yes, there are plenty of ways you can take your granddaughter out to dinner. The one who wants you to come down to the strip club. You can take her out to dinner. You can pay her mortgage or pay her rent. You can buy her new tires. There's plenty of ways to show her that you love her and show the love of Christ without confirming in her mind and heart that what she's doing is okay in God's eyes. And that's part of the disagreement we had with Pastor Begg's.
All right, so we decided as a leadership team here to remove the radio program because he wouldn't recant. He wouldn't say, I made a mistake, I stepped in it, I'm sorry. Or even he wouldn't say, I can understand how people would feel the way that you guys do. I didn't even hear him say that. But anyway, we didn't do anything but wish Pastor Begg well. We just separated. We just said, we got to move on. We can't, that's an unacceptable answer. Well, somebody sent me the message that Pastor Begg had from the pulpit.
The following Sunday.
This past Sunday, right? And he tripled down.
Yeah, he tripled, and he did a little worse than that because he used Scripture to affirm his position, which is he used Luke chapter 15, and he did not just take his position and hold to it. Instead, he criticized those by calling them names if you disagree
with
us.
Him.
Yeah, us.
He didn't name us, but that's who he's talking about. People like us.
People that hold a biblical position that a homosexual marriage is a ceremonial act in which we are not going to participate in.
Okay.
And so, he went on to say that he implied that those that criticized him were of like the angry brother in Luke chapter 15. He also accused us of being American fundamentalists, which he would never be a part of.
That's what he said. I'm not a part of that.
Yeah, I'm not a part of that. American fundamentalist. And he also implied that anything
American fundamentalist. What does he mean by that, Ed? Excuse me if you interrupted.
Sure.
Well, he's talking about and his implication in the course of talking about the parable of the prodigal son was that we were like Pharisees.
That's right. He said that.
He said that. And so when he says American fundamentalists, he's talking about evangelicals who are harsh and critical and not loving enough to try to reach out to people who are in sin.
As opposed to British Christians who, in his mind, are of different ilk than we are.
So for me, after listening to his sermon, the worst part about it for me is that he ignored purposefully or is blinded to the difference between attending a ceremonial act of homosexual marriage and loving your neighbor. Because none of us here, even Ed and Walker, none of us had any qualms or disagreements biblically of associating with or being around, or he said of anybody who's in sin. We don't have an issue with being at dinner and looking across.
Well, how can you be a witness if you never hang out with sinners at all?
Exactly, right. And that's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians.
Yeah, so nobody's
5.
arguing that.
Nobody. But he implied that's what we're saying, and we're not.
If you don't go to a homosexual wedding ceremony. If you say I can't go to a homosexual wedding ceremony because I don't approve of that, that's immoral and wrong in the eyes of God.
Sure.
I'm not going to go sit there, sing their songs, watch them light candles together.
Right.
Clap when everybody claps at the end. I'm not going to throw rice at two men who walking out of the I'm not going to do that. I'm not celebrating, and I'm certainly not bringing them a gift.
Right.
Huh? And Pastor Ben said bring them a gift. I guess find out what register they're on.
He insulted us by saying that we don't want to be stained by other people's sin. And that's
just garbage. That's just not true. That's an inaccurate presentation of the views of, quote, American fundamentalists.
That's right.
Don't you think?
Oh, no, it's absolutely wrong. But I will say this, and then we'll let Steve in here, okay? It is that view is increasingly infiltrating into evangelical churches, and it is confusing people.
So you get the Revoice movement.
You get the Revoice movement. We've had Michael Perkins on. Anyway, we can explore those issues in more detail at a later time. So I probably said
I think it was Abe last night. He did deal with this last night. But somebody has made the argument that attending a wedding is not the same as attending a concert. You're not there as an observer. You're there as part of the covenant act. That's why they say if anybody here has a problem with this, speak now.
That's a good point.
We're
forever hold your peace.
Right. We are before God and these witnesses. We are, so it's different. It's different than.
Well, the preacher says, I'm a minister. I've performed many, many weddings. At the end, I say, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. How can a Christian sit there and listen and applaud that line?
Yeah. That's
okay. This is bordering on blasphemy, because Christ chose the marriage union of a man and a woman as the symbol of himself and his church.
Yep.
If you attend a homosexual wedding, you are arguing, in essence, that if Christ wanted to, he could pick two men as the symbol of his relationship to the church. That's why I say you're getting close to blasphemy. Now, I do want to be fair to Pastor Begg. His representatives told us that Pastor Begg, agrees with our view on homosexuality and homosexual marriage. Where we differ is on whether a Christian can attend, but his sermon almost brings him to the place where he says it's okay for a Christian to go and celebrate the union of two men, and I'm saying that is wrong.
And what's furthermore, and if you got a problem with that, you're a Pharisee.
Yes.
Is that?
Yes.
That's what he said.
That's right.
That's exactly what he said, and that's what makes things worse here.
He also twisted the meaning of the parable of the prodigal son.
How?
Well, he twisted it by implying that a Christian going to a homosexual wedding is showing the love to the homosexual like the father showed to his younger son who was lost. But you know what? The father didn't go and live with the son in the pigsty.
That's right.
And take a gift.
No,
Here, this will help you as you stay in the pigsty.
He waited for the son to repent.
Yes.
Once the son repented, then they celebrated.
Right.
The celebration came after the repentance, not as a result of their sin.
Yes.
You know what? I don't know Pastor Begg personally. He's a wonderful Bible expositor and evidently an excellent pastor to the church there. But he's just being hard-headed.
That's exactly right. Yep.
I don't know if it's Scottish stubbornism, if stubbornism is a word.
Stubbornism.
But you know what? He's wrong, and he knows it.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well,
all right. I don't know him, but come on, man. This is not hard, okay?
Right.
If you have a son who's an alcoholic, and he says, "Daddy, drive me to the bar,"
yeah, you're going to say no.
You're going to say, "No, I'm not driving you to the bar." If you go to the bar, you're a grown man. That's your own choice. But I'm not going down. I'm not going down there with you. You know, I'm not going down there and participating in your sin.
I'm certainly not going to buy you a drink.
Right.
If you're an alcoholic.
Okay. But if you take Alistair Begg's view, then you have to say, I need to drive him to the bar and buy him a drink.
With him.
Go in with him and buy him a drink. But otherwise, he's going to think I'm judgmental.
Yes.
Huh?
That's
absolutely
right.
That's the kind of logic we're talking about here.
Yes,
it is.
So anyway, again, we didn't start the fire here. All right,
it was always burning since the world was turning.
This was Pastor Begg. God bless him. This was his decision to bring this up on a podcast. He didn't even have to bring it up. He brought it up on his own. So he wanted to say this, and he wanted to make this point, and it put us in a predicament here at American Family Radio, because we've been airing his show for a long time. People calling us saying, "What are you going to do? You agree with him on this?" This is a serious issue. It is a serious issue.
And it's going to hurt his ministry beyond this.
This isn't a peripheral issue. This is a core issue to Scripture and to our and to what's going on in the church and in culture today. And our stand is same-sex weddings and marriages are illegitimate. Biblically, they're illegitimate. And as you guys have said, we can find 1,001 ways to love homosexuals and gay people, and nobody's discouraging that at all. We have to.
Nobody's shunning them.
We have to mix with people in the world who don't agree with us in order to show the love of the Lord. And no question about that. Go ahead, Steve.
My prayer for Pastor Begg is that he does find some kind of repentance, because every movement that has gone off the rails started with a little crack.
That's right.
And Andy Stanley.
That's right.
Started with just, but then it grew to full-blown apostasy.
Well, the part that I resent the most about the positions that people like Andy Stanley and Alistair Begg have taken, again, they are, I'm sure they're wonderful, they're godly men in a lot of ways and have a lot of wisdom. But on this issue, what they've done here is, quite frankly, they've said, I don't want to be like Wildman or Tony Perkins or American Family Association. I don't want to be viewed as judgmental. on this issue. So I'll say it's okay. I'll take the opposite view, so that I'm not lumped in with those American fundamentalists,
Right?
Who are oftentimes almost universally, what we say is misconstrued on purpose, especially in the secular media, to make us out to be things that we're not.
That's exactly right.
And when he calls us American fundamentalists
and Pharisees,
he's participating in what the media does.
Throwing us under the bus.
Right.
That's what it's doing here.
Good news is the Bible is extremely clear on this. We should not condone or participate in the ceremonial
in
act.
the unfruitful works of darkness, you said last.
That's right, Ephesians.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on the program today. Have a wonderful afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
Spiritual Heritage Tours with AFA President Tim Wildman include a tour of Washington,